Okay, the first accident, the Bell 205A, Tehachapi, California, September 4th of 2011, and you'll notice it says there were no injuries. It was on an exclusive use contract to the Forest Service. However, the aircraft was supporting Kern County firefighting efforts on the Canyon Fire, which was not a Forest Service operation, on September 4th of 2011. So you see there later in the day, 14:45 hours, the Bell 205A sustained substantial damage when the pilot attempted to execute an emergency landing due to an in-flight malfunction. He executed a downwind landing, which resulted in the spreading of the skids and the damage that you'll see here in a moment. So some things about the mission to keep in mind: the air attack was over the fire and providing aerial supervision, and the mission was to provide structural protection and, in this case, spot fire suppression approximately 3 miles south of the Mountain Valley Airport. There were some other aircraft over the fire, in particular in the immediate location, another Type 2 and Type 1 helitanker, both under control of Kern County Fire. This particular aircraft, Hotel 522, was operating with a Bambi bucket that was belly slung, hooked directly to the cargo hook, and the aircraft was on approach for a water drop. So he's at about 100 feet and 10 knots over the drop spot. He hears an RPM horn and notices, very quickly glances over to his instrument panel and notices an illuminated caution light. So his immediate actions were to jettison the load and execute a left pedal turn. He was approaching high ground, and there was a road off to his left. However, he knew that would be burned over very quickly, so he decided to execute his left turn, which would get him both away from the fire and away from the rising train. So of note here, he checks his N2 TAC gauge, which is the rotor and engine RPM, and notices the needles are split with rotor RPM, as it says there, 4 or 5 o'clock, and the engine RPM at 6 o'clock. And he interprets this to be a high side governor failure or an engine overspeed. So this picture shows the approximate flight path in the landing area. Again, he interprets it to be indications of a governor failure. In this case, he detects, based on what he sees on the gauge, the needles indicating a high side governor failure and overspeed. So he spots this open area as he's turning away from the fire, and immediately determines that he's going to execute an emergency landing. Whether he loses power or not, he's going to get the aircraft on the ground in this area and troubleshoot from there. So in the short amount of time, which we estimated he had about 8 to 15 seconds for this entire sequence to take place, he commences his manual governor emergency procedures. So he rolls the twist grip to idle, or lowers the collective, rolls it to idle, throws the governor switch to emergency, and then increases the twist grip as he's pulling collective. As he pulls collective, he feels the rotor RPM decrease, looks back over at the gauge, and notices the gauge is now indicating 90% NR, which is at the bottom of his green range. So at about 200 to 300 feet, he continues to feel like he can't maintain altitude, and his rotor RPM is decreasing. He lowers the collective to go ahead and fully establish that auto-rotated profile into the landing zone. There's a good depiction of it. You can see the smoke off to the upper right. That is the approximate location where he was doing his water drops. That's how close the fire was to this landing zone. This is a current picture which shows the zone as it was in the state when he actually landed. So it had been cleared a little more than the previous picture showed. But you can see his profile, which was a left turn, and then at the 180 he dropped he was able to jettison his bucket and make his final approach over the trees and over the house that you can see at the edge of the clearing into the landing zone. So again, the picture depicts a very short amount of time for him to make his decision. So we'll show some of the damage. You can see the skids are obviously folded. Some damage to the sheet metal around the skids and the cross tubes where they folded, which is what you would expect. Some damage to the aft tail boom section, which is basically the same thing, minor sheet metal damage. Tail stinger was bent straight upwards. There was no sideways deflection, so that was a good indication to us that he made a straight-in approach. There was no drift on final at all. Greenhouse plexiglass over the cockpit, which he was sitting in the left seat at the time, was broken, and there were some pieces of plexiglass around the LZ. And the remaining damage, just some minor damage to the chin bowl. The mirror bar was bent, obviously, and then anything under the aircraft as far as the rotating beacon and lights were also damaged. Some of the findings, the pilot in command had a good amount of time, almost 9,000 hours and a little over 900 hours in model. Was current on all of his training. As the second bullet shows, the pilot who landed in the accident LZ immediately after, he heard the Mayday call and was very close by, obviously, and executed his landing. He said probably less than a minute. He was on the ground behind the accident aircraft, and actually the main rotor system on the accident aircraft hadn't come to a complete stop when he was on the ground, so it was very shortly after. But he indicated that he needed almost maximum torque to land, which was, again, indication of a very strong tailwind that he landed with. So these bullets here just go to show the amount of time, which was very, very little, that the pilot had to make his decision. He had 400 feet or less to troubleshoot. Again, we estimated probably 8 to 15 seconds in total to determine his course of action. And once he determined what he was going to do, he followed the procedure for the failed governor and was unable to restore what he felt was adequate rotor RPM to maintain safe flight. The teardown that was done a few days after the accident revealed a failure of the engine N2 TAC gen shaft. So, you know, indications there that really what he had was a bad gauge. Pilot jettisoned the load when the situation got bad. He had very good situational awareness to be able to accomplish that. When we looked at the situation he was in, when you consider the noise, the smoke, the vibration of the aircraft, him being seated in the left-hand seat with the gauge on the right-hand side of the cockpit, an analog gauge with needles that were, you know, vibrating, et cetera, and then just the general stress of the situation that he was in, he did show very good head work and developed a nice plan and stuck to it. His altitude was very limited, which gave him, again, very limited time to troubleshoot the problem, but he developed a plan and stuck to it. And the key there, you know, putting yourself in the pilot situation is that his choice to land in the open area was much better than trying to limp an aircraft with an undetermined malfunction all the way down to the airport. So the last bullet there, the hard landing in an open area, is much better than the uncontrolled crash into the trees.